Hello and welcome to the Beatport podcast. I'm your host Tigerlight, and today Cape Town-born producer and DJ Jazzuelle graces us with his presence for a chat via Skype from Johannesburg. Jazzuelle's sound is ever evolving and combines influences ranging from deep house to electronica, ambient, Kwaito music, Afro house, techno and beyond. Rebelling against conformity and constantly seeking inner growth as a composer, Jazzuelle's new album Rebirth is out now on Get Physical Music. Beatport Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Predominantly, you're a self-taught producer and DJ, but you grew up with your uncle who played guitar to you as a child, right?
Yeah.
And later you got into music production and playing piano yourself. What kinds of other musical influences were you surrounded by in Cape Town that helped you mould your early sound?
Well, in Cape Town, most of us in the townships listen to Kwaito, which is basically slowed down, kind of like house beats, but like on a really slow tempo. And what the guys used to do back in those days, they used to record and sing over them. And I mean, they used to communicate different, like, you know, like various messages, mostly about the political kind of like situation in the country back then, as you might know, like apartheid and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And basically, yeah, that's what and that's what I grew up listening to until, I mean, obviously, I, you know, was influenced by the things I was listening to in radio. Like I started discovering psytrance and trance and you know, we used to call it electro back then, you know, and yeah, and basically I just discovered like a lot just by listening to radio, and you know.
Yeah, what about your move from Cape Town to Johannesburg? What spurred that on?
I kind of started realizing that it wouldn't be really possible at that time to kind of pursue like a music career in a place like Cape Town with the climate back then for unknown artists, you know. I most of the guys that were into electronic music back then, you had to have like a job. You couldn't pursue a career in music and not have a job. Otherwise you were just going to starve, you know. And the only place I'd say back then and now, depending on who you know now, but like back then, you had to move to a place like Johannesburg. Johannesburg is like almost like the New York of Africa, you know. It's where people in the entertainment industry come to kind of like pursue their dreams, you know. Like I remember Black Coffee saying this in a Rebirth Music Academy interview, I think a few years ago as well, and he said that if you make it in Cape Town as an artist, you know, most of the time, especially back then, you'd only be known in Cape Town. But if you make it in Johannesburg, you'd be known everywhere else in the country. It kind of like just pushed me to kind of like just believe that things would happen this side of the world, you know. There's a DJ, a legend, a pioneer of the South African house sound, Vinnie Da Vinci, who also he also kind of like encouraged me to move to Johannesburg, you know. And he said that all I had to do was just take that first step, and then, you know, and just hope for the best and just work hard, and voila.
That gorgeous track that you've been listening to was Rebirth by Jazzuelle featuring Shimza, and is the title track taken from his new album of the same name. You run a night called Dark Disco in Johannesburg. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I started Dark Disco last year with one of the artists from Black Coffee's record label, Takapo. So we just sat down once and I was like, hey dude, these guys are giving me a slot every month. Or no, back then it wasn't every month, it was every 3 months. And they just gave us the opportunity and we took it, and and that's the party basically.
I heard that you run competitions for up-and-coming local DJs to win gigs for the opening slots, and one of the competition questions was, what does deep house mean to you? What were you looking for specifically in the replies, and what does deep house mean to you?
That was actually a couple's idea back then, because I'm just, I don't really specifically look for deep house DJs to play at the party. There's a certain, I can't really describe it, but there's a certain sound that we look for. That's why most of the time I kind of like recycle lineups, because I'm not, especially when I'm doing it alone now, where I'm not really sure about who plays what and how, and so it's much easier for me to recycle like lineups and stuff. And I mean, about the second question about what deep house means to me, it's actually a bit of a tough one. And
you threw it out to them.
It's just, I don't know. It's just house music, Yeah, I know. No, because I wasn't, I was never the one who brainstormed the whole competition thing, I was just like, let people send guest mixes and let's see how we or what we like, and then we'll just book them. You know what I mean? Because we were all too busy to do that, and the guys were like, no, listen, let's just ask people and what they think of the genre, or what it means to them. And to be honest, it was more like we were looking for effort. Do you know what I mean? We wanted to see how much effort these guys are going to put in to describe what this music that's taken over the country and what it means to them, And so we really chose the guys that really went in, They really said, I mean, there was a guy talking about the universe at one point, and I was like, wow, man. It's one of the biggest genres in South Africa. Do you know what I mean? You hear it everywhere, in church sometimes, you hear it playing in a taxi, in shops, in malls, and, so I knew that it wasn't going to be that hard to find people that would kind of like substantiate the ideas about the genre or what it means to them in the country,
Did he get the gig, the Universe guy?
I don't remember, actually. I think it did.
You were also quoted as saying in relation to Deep House that Africa is on the rise and we should stop seeing North America and Europe as a benchmark, but see ourselves as the benchmark. For our listeners outside of Johannesburg who haven't had the chance to explore Johannesburg's nightlife, can you give a glimpse into what the electronic music scene is like there?
Oh, wow, man. Because Star from here is probably, not even probably, but Black Coffee, and Black Coffee, I wouldn't say he's a deep house producer or artist. He was back in the day, but now they push more of the Afro sound, and when people see South Africa, they shouldn't just look at the country as an Afro house making country. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot going on, there's guys that are pioneering the electronic music scene and ambient music. There's guys that are in the deep house music industry that have not been given the opportunity to be heard, and I basically said, we need people from outside of our shores to kind of like do more research and find out who these artists are, you know what I mean? And I mean, there's nothing wrong with Afro House, I love Afro House and everything, but I just feel like the country has more to give than Afro House.
This is the Detron Dub remix of Jazzuelle's and Lars Behrenroth's Fall Into You featuring Tamara Day. Well, it's lucky for us that you have been noticed, and your new album, Rebirth, is out on Get Physical Music. It came out on the 24th of August. Can you tell us a little bit about how that collaboration came about and what the process was like making the album?
I first started speaking with Get Physical when I was working with a friend of mine, the Lazarus Man, who's also here in South Africa, also a deep house artist, and we used to stay together, and I think we were both dumped, and we used to stay together. And so I remember this one day we were both sulking, and I did a track, and he just because he's a spoken word artist, he just randomly found words to the song, and I imported the song on my Cubase back then, and I randomly did 6 versions of the song, and the guy that is doing his publishing or is managing him, he's the one that had the contact with Get Physical back then. And I mean, after that, one thing led to the next, and I found myself speaking to the A&R guy, Matt Duplessis, who's still the A&R guy at Get Physical. And after that, they asked me to do a remix, and then after a remix, it was offering me opportunity to do the album. And then, and then I met them when I went to Berlin in 14 or 15. I was booked to play, I think it was a wet deck Beatport party. And so they were just like, you know what, since you're already here in Europe, come to the studio, meet the guys, and basically one thing led to the next. They offered me a 3-album contract. I just released the second one now, and the next one comes, I think my contract with them ends like next year on June or something like that. So I'm busy with the last album already now. As soon as this one dropped, I started working on the third one. So basically, it started back then in 2015, and they've been really amazing to me. I don't think I would be where I am in my career now, if it wasn't for the family at Get Physical, man. They've been really wonderful, and I'm not the easiest person to work with, but They've been really kind and they work really hard. So I'm really like kind of like, thankful to them.
Why do you say you're not the easiest person to work with?
I'm stubborn, I'm really stubborn. I've always been like, hey, I've got this vision, and if I want something to happen like this, then I want something to happen like this because it looks perfect in my mind. I kind of had to like bring myself down and appreciate their advice, I'm really close with the guys, the Mandy guys, they've always been guiding me and stuff. I mean, they've been in the industry for more than 20 years, So I kind of had to like be humble, and listen to what they had to say, especially with the first album where we were all in the studio in Berlin, and it was like the most nerve-wracking experience of my life because I had these guys, the owner of Get Physical, Mandy, my manager at that time, Matt, who's also like the NR guy, and everyone was just listening to the first album, and they had their input. And some of the times I didn't like their input, but I had to kind of like swallow it, and my manager used to just look at me and say, calm down, just trust them, they know what they're talking about. So I've grown with them, man. They've taught me a lot about myself as well. Just in regards to just like listening to other people and seeing things from a different perspective. Do you know what I mean?
That was your debut, Circles, and it took 2 years to write.
Oh yeah, it took a long time. I think I was also just going through a lot. I had a breakup, and the breakup really affected, just how to kind of like write music. I just got slammed with like writer's block, and my head was not in the right place, So I needed time, and I told them. I mean, it upset them, but I told them I needed time to just think. That's when I went to Berlin again, and yeah, I don't know how I got over it actually, but I think because the first album changed 3 times because I had like a pool of I think I had like over 40 songs, and the first idea was I wanted to, because I love space, I'm fascinated by the universe and everything, and I named some of the tunes after like planets and moons, and they were like, we don't know about that, and I was like, no, but this is what I want to do. I have this vision, of space and everything, so I don't know. I don't remember how it changed to Circles, because I remember I had a different name for the first album. The second album was actually written for a label here in South Africa called House Africa, and the label, Get Physical, emailed me and they were like, Jazz, we love this album. We want to release this internationally. And I was like, no, because I had a different vision for the next album for Get Physical internationally. I'd planned like a different sound altogether, because I wanted to kind of like step away from the kind of like the sound I was doing, because I feel like the South African deep house sound, what the rest of the world considers deep house, is very different. It's very different, man, and so the album I did, the current one, the Rebirth, I knew that was my last kind of like album for the scene here, and the next album would be more of a techier kind of like style of deep house and more focused on the floor and stuff. But the guys were like, no, we like this. And I was just so confused, and I was just like, okay, you know what, let's just release it, So it first got released here in South Africa for the South African territory, and then Get Physical took it internationally. And, literally had a whole different artwork, for Rebirth and everything. So Rebirth is basically the last kind of like deep house album with my signature, because it wasn't challenging, because I literally did the whole album Rebirth in, I think it took me a week and a few days, and I remember I was uploading snippets on my Instagram live while I was doing it. I was like day 1, day 2, day 3, and basically in a week I was done with it, and it's amazing because I never thought that Get Physical would even like consider pushing it, as a second album, but they were like, this is hard, man, and I was like, oh, Okay.
Even with the features, you managed to do it in 1 week.
Yeah, no, because the guys I've been speaking with for a while, you know. So I just told everyone, listen, on this day, because it was crazy, because I was like literally rushing everyone. I knew the guys, like, let's say Lars Bernhardt, they're in the States. I know he has a family, blah, blah, blah. So if I wanted to do something with him, I had to tell him like 3 days prior. And then basically I'd be like, hey, it's Thursday. Have you got the parts? And he'd send me parts. Some of them were just laughing. They were like, Jesus, dude, and because I was just like, I just had this thing where I pressured myself on purpose to finish everything in a week.
How do you feel about the record now?
I still feel the same, man. I think because it's a sound that I've been wanting to get out of for a while, but I had to find a way, or I had to find the right time to kind of like get out of it. That's why I've already got like a next EP coming out next month. Because it's like I told the guys like, yo, guys, this is for South Africa. For the rest of the world, I want something else. And because I was surprised even when I had the features, man, with DJ Mag and stuff, and the guy that was, especially the guy that was doing the feature in Spain, DJ Mag Spain, was like, this is amazing. And I was just so confused, I was like, why? Because I want to get away from this, because I feel like the sound, my signature is kind of like self-limiting, I'm not given the chance to explore different sounds. That's why I told myself I did it for the scene in South Africa, because I knew that there's certain sounds I can't use because it's too techy for the scene here or whatever, but everyone loves it, man. So I don't know, I'm conflicted, I love it, but I'm also like, I really want to move away from this. So, I can probably invite new opportunities into my career as well,
That's going to be so exciting for everybody to listen to your explorations in sound.
Yeah.
And you can always go back to your old sound as well. The first track on your album was named after your daughter, is that right?
Yes, yeah, Manero.
How has becoming a dad changed your life as a producer and a DJ and an artist?
Oh, it's crazy, because I always needed like kind of like, what do they call this, a muse, especially after my breakup, because at that time my ex was my muse for the longest time, and so when that fell apart, like, it was hard, because I was like, oh man, where am I going to find inspiration now, And when my daughter arrived, I knew from that first day that she's going to be a source of inspiration for not just my music, but my whole life. You know what I mean? Like, I just wanted to work all the time, and it kind of also just like made me more focused and kind of like clear-headed about where I really need to be and what I need to do to get there, and the sacrifices that I'll have to kind of like, force myself to get where I need to be for the sake of being there for my daughter, So she's really changed my life a lot.
What is house music? What is house music? What is house music? What What is house music? 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 What is house music?
That was Jazzuelle on the Deeper Acid remix duties with DJ Pierre's What is House Musik? I've heard that you're thinking of moving to Berlin. Will you be coming over, all of you, together?
Well, yeah. I mean, the plan's always been to be in Europe. You know, I came back last year to South Africa because me and my ex basically broke up the month before she told me she was pregnant, which is crazy because I'd already told myself I'm not really gonna come back to South Africa. Even Get Physical had already signed this invitation letter saying that they're my employer and everything. So I was even staying with someone in Berlin, you know. So I'd already planned that. Okay, now I'm gonna do my best to stay here more than South Africa, you know. And then when she said she was pregnant, I just had to come back, man. I had to see my daughter, you know. So I've been here for a year, and I feel like I'd rather leave now while she's still she just turned 1 last week on Saturday, actually. So I feel like I'd want to leave now, and push my career more in Europe. And then, I mean, I'll always come and visit here in Joburg. I have to, you know, or I'll fly her into Europe and, you know, to visit me or whatever, you know. It's a tough decision, but it's basically also I'm doing it for her as well, because I mean everything's great here in Johannesburg, but it's not happening at the scale that I want it to be, and I feel like I need to just get out and seize whatever opportunities I can seize in outside of Africa, you know.
Of course, and from an inspiration perspective for your art, Berlin is such an amazing city. I'm sure your music's going to flourish. Is there anything else about Berlin that makes you want to come here?
I think the beer. I remember this one evening, I met up with a friend that's based there in Berlin. He basically took me to I think more than 7 bars, and we were just beer tasting. And I was with the guys from Detroit Swindle, and I almost had an argument with one of them because I was just the beer in Germany sucks, man. You know, and the other guy is you don't ever say that, dude. You don't ever say that. Besides joking, I mean, it's the one place that every artist that I know of, you know, that I've ever known of, wants to be. I don't see myself living anywhere else in the world, but Berlin or I'd say London or something, you know. But basically, yeah, Berlin is the one place that I want to be based at, from as early as November, because I'm planning on coming very soon. And basically, hopefully, for the rest of my life.
Moving forward to your next release, you have a dark, brooding Afro techno release coming out on Mo Black Records. There's a really haunting vocal on Above Smoke, one of the tracks. Where did that come from, and where did you draw your inspiration for the EP?
Oh, well, that whole EP is it's a sound that I've been harnessing for quite some time, because I've been trying to look for a sound other than my existing sound, like the sound I had on Rebirth. I think I had over 50 demos where I was just sending music to labels and someone responding, someone getting back to me. And I basically I never give up, you know, and I basically just kept trying, and I kept starting over and over. Because I met Mimo from More Black in Croatia when I played Sanse Beat, you know. So I knew that his label was pushing Afro house and kind of an Afro tech vibe and whatnot. So he always just uploads little snippets of these big artists, you know, playing music from the label and whatnot. So I needed a label that I could trust to kind of push my music or the new style in the right direction, so the right people can grab it and play it, you know, because it's so easy to send music to labels and get it released, and then it just gets overlooked. The new EP is basically the future of Jazzuelle, because I remember listening to the EP I think more than 20 times, and I was like, am I ready to really do this? Am I doing this? So I sent it to Mimo, and he just went crazy, man. He went nuts. He was like, "Oh my gosh!" He was sending me kissing emojis, and he was like, "I love you. This is amazing." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And he was like, "Dude, let me push this for you, and it's a winner. Let's try it out." So basically, the sound is more of an Afro-based, not limited to Afro though, but it's more like an Afro-based tech kind of like sound, that's really pushing the floor. For the longest time, I never made music for people to dance to. I don't think I did. That wasn't the intention. If it was a house song, it was just like a house song, It just had like a beat for you to bump your head to, but it was never really like something you could play like a peak hour, Now it's like the intention is to make music to dance to, which was like kind of challenging because I've never had that kind of like idea, like in the initial stages when I make music. Now it's like from the early stages of producing a song, like in groove, I've already like pictured a song playing like in peak hour and stuff. You asked me something about the Above Smoke.
The vocal.
Yeah, it's a sample that I found on Logic somewhere, like at 4 a.m. in the morning. It's on my Omnisphere. And I basically just typed Africa, I just said Africa, I found this sample and I played it in a way that made it sound like this person singing for the song I was doing.
That's why I thought it was recorded for it. Really fits
Yeah,
it.
because I had to cut it a bit to make it sound like, because I actually have no idea what she's saying. I won't lie to you. I have no idea what she's saying.
She could be reading a shopping list.
I hope not. I hope not. So it was like, and I love that. Sometimes I don't want to know what someone's saying, or I don't want to. I love things that happen spontaneously in the studio. I love the magic that happens when you don't really plan too much. You just flow and you just allow yourself to be taken under spell. And basically that whole EP it happened so quickly because I was just like on this roll, and like I said, I did it with a vision. I wanted to see myself playing it out there. I wanted to see guys like Solomon dropping it somewhere, in a big festival. And, that's the intention I had. I wanted to make a rocking EP for the first time in my life, and yeah, and then I finished it. And because I'm really excited. I'm expecting to lose a bit of my fan base here in South Africa, because guys in South Africa basically like, if you're a deep house producer, you stick to the sound. You don't get too focused on basically the sounds I was focusing on the EP. The moment you jump over to that, it's like, no, homie, we're not doing this with you. The fans that I might gain, relative to the fans that I might lose are greater. I'm hoping, man, because for me it's just like I just want to turn a new leaf and focus more on this because it's new to me. I'm exploring sounds that I've never explored, like on my Omnisphere now, for instance, like sounds that I've always suppressed, or overlooked because I felt like, no, this is sounds a bit too much like techno or whatever. And now it's like, hey, there's just this huge palette of music and the style of making music that I've always been avoiding because I was too scared of judgment, and now I've just like, I don't care anymore. It's like, it's all about my growth and where I'm taking my brand,
Via Lazy Days Music, you're listening to Darkest Shade by Jazzuelle. You sent over to Beatport this secret link to an ambient album, and I listened to it yesterday, and I swear I had tears in my eyes. The Firefly track, it was just got to me. Like the hairs on the ends of my arm were standing up. It's absolutely stunning. You've got the Mo Black Records EP, Rebirth, and then this album. I think it's great. You know, what's your plan? Are you going to release it under the name Jazzuelle or under a different artist synonym?
I considered changing the name for the EP on Mo Black, you know, and I'm not really a big fan of that, you know, having two different synonyms or three, you know. It just reminds me of how I've grown, you know, and I want people to hear that I started like this. For me, it's like evolution. I want people to hear that I'm not really confined in this one genre, man. I just make music. Because also the ambient album wasn't planned. It's basically, and I don't have a pastime. I don't have anything I do besides making music or playing gigs. So I was like, I need a pastime. How about just I make music without any beats? That'll be my pastime. Because I did the ambient album while I was doing the Rebirth album. Because my mind would be so fried because I was forcing so much work in such a short space of time doing Rebirth. So I'd always feel like I had like anxiety or whatever. So I needed something that was calming, you know? So I'd basically just jump in bed, you know, I had my food, and then I'd basically just mess around, you know, with a mouse on my Logic, and I'd basically finish songs, you know, and just wake up in the morning, do a little mix down, and then that was that, and then I'd jump over to the next one.
When do you think that will be out?
I hopefully soon, because I've sent it out to a few labels, but I haven't really gotten any feedback back, you know. Also, I don't want it to be released on a label that won't give it the viewership or the listenership or whatever, you know what I mean? I want it to be heard. So I'm just waiting for the right label to pick it up and to hear it. And then hopefully this year, you know, after maybe 3 months after the EP's dropped, you know, hopefully this year, basically.
Well, if there's any ambient label heads listening to this, you should get this because it's amazing.
Thank
I genuinely
you so much.
love it. Really, really do. You mentioned that your debut Circles was a concept based on your fascination with sacred geometry. And Rebirth, you was tipping its hat toward exoplanets and distant moons. Can we expect any more concepts in the new projects moving forward?
Yeah, it's crazy because the new album, the third one, I've already finished the first song. I mean, I don't know if it's the right time to say this, but I basically want to call it the North Star. I've got this fascination, and there's a new fascination with the North Star, being one of the brightest stars, and the first track is basically called Polaris, which is another name for the North Star. And basically I just had this idea because I work quick. I think I do that because I work quicker like that when I base my music on ideas or whatever, or these star names or whatever, because it kind of like gives it a theme. And I finish quicker when I'm like that.
Do you have that image in your mind when you're writing, and then you're having that feeling of what that image evokes in you whilst you're writing the track, or is it just that it gives it a framework?
I actually do. Like sometimes I'll look at a picture, like some nebula, in some distant galaxy or whatever, and I'll try and put music to that. And I think that's how I also just slowly got involved with scoring like these short films and stuff, because I've always wanted to do it.
Tell us more about that. So you've scored 3 short films. What was the process like? How did that come about?
It happened so spontaneously, and because I live with one of the guys I live with is a film director and is a writer, and it happened when we were speaking, we had breakfast, and he was like, "Hey dude, listen, I've got this project happening where I'm documenting or showing a different side or a more melancholic side of Johannesburg, in the city, that a lot of people don't get to see, and like I was like, amazing, dude, send me the video and I'll try and put music to it or whatever I can." And basically that's how it started, and he loved the first one, and we jumped to the second one. Now we're busy with the third one. He just gave it to me and just said, I'm giving you the freedom to just, give this an energy, that you feel would suit it best, and because he's heard my ambient tracks before. So I think that's why he came to me and he was like, well, I've got someone living right here with me. How about he just gives it a shot and see where it goes,
It's just also a really different way of writing when you're not thinking about the dance floor at all, but you're thinking about supporting the scene. Do you feel that that's going to influence your new album, and in what way?
I think it's going to make it interesting because now I've already told myself that I want to focus more on the floor, but I know that I don't want to lose the things that make me Jazzuelle, Yeah, the style might change, but if you're listening to the music, I want you to know that it's still me. Do you know what I mean? I don't want you to feel like I've completely submerged my style, or I always focus on emotion. My music's driven by emotions. It's feel music, So I try and keep that. Even if I make something that's focused on the floor, but I try and keep the whole element of feeling, because if music doesn't have feeling, it's just beats, man,
So you also released a remix for Atjazz this year, and you've said that you wouldn't be here without Atjazz. Can you elaborate as to how he's influenced you?
Oh, Martin's changed my life, man. Like, just from back in the day, like, he was like, I think my music influences now have kind of changed. I follow probably more techno artists like Jeff Mills and stuff, or Derek May or whatever, only because techno has always been this genre that I was scared to kind of like follow back in the day, because the only people we followed back then was guys like Martin Iverson, Atjazz, Charles Webster, and that was the sound, and that still is the sound in South Africa, South Africa's got this thing where in the deep house scene, we're stuck on a certain sound and we don't want to move. It's kind of changing slowly now, but, the mass market of the deep house industry here is still stuck on music that, let's say, Atjazz did 9 years ago. You still pay it anywhere now, and the reactions are crazy. It's like he did it like last weekend, So basically, yeah, he's influenced me a lot, and he's also just responsible for for my growth as well. He's been giving me a lot of advice from back in the day, you know, also Charles Webster as well, you know, and creatively, you know, they really gave me kind of like a lot of motivation to stick with making music that I was confident with. They encouraged me to kind of like focus on emotion, you know, and not get kind of like uh, kind of like washed in the current of commercial music or whatever, you know.
You've gone from having quite heavy writer's block, taking 2 years to write that album, going through that heartbreak, to entering a really prolific moment in your career. What advice would you have for any producers or composers listening that might be going through the same thing? And how did you get out of that writer's block?
I think you just have to just trust yourself, man, you know, and be confident, you know, not rush yourself, you know, just be confident about your journey, you know that it takes time, you know, to grow and because, you know, some of the tunes that I'm doing now compared to what I was doing or what wasn't picked up back then, when I listen to it now, I'm like, oh wow, did I really do that, you know? And because most of the time we don't really hear ourselves, you know. We always, you know, you make a tune, you're like, oh, this is going to be the biggest thing in the world, you know. And then like now, like I just said now, like the music that I did back then, just quality wise as well, you know, because I remember back in the days of releasing with Martin and Foliage, I never really did mix downs. You know, I just hope for the best. I was just like, hey, I'm just going to hope for the best, you know. Because I noticed, I was like, why do these masters sound like this? Some of them are really low. And then, you know, I realized, oh, wow, I was skipping like this whole phase, you know, the mix downs and whatnot. And so I really got into that, you know, and kind of like self-studied it or whatever they call that, you know, and really put a lot of effort in understanding the whole process of mixing and a bit of mastering to make it easier for the mastering engineer as well, you know.
So you feel that going and studying more music production helped to unblock your block?
Yeah. I randomly just go on YouTube and just watch something for the next 3 days. You know, I've got like this photographic memory where I just remember everything. You know, all right. I've got these pages at my place where I put notes of, you know, frequency bands and everything, or mixing notes, you know, what to do in the lower end in the song, or how to balance the lower end with my bass line or whatever, you know, my kick drum or whatever, you know. So I mean, it looks weird, but probably because why? It's probably the reason I got dumped as well. But you know, but yeah, this is me, you know. I do it a lot, and it's kind of opened because mixing music as well has kind of opened a lot for me. You know, now I enjoy it more. I know why it's done. You know, the masters sound better. You know, so I think to anyone out there, you know, if you've got the money, go to school, study it. You know, it's there for a reason. You know, you can't turn a blind eye and expect your music to be amazing, or to even to be even accepted by record labels. You know, these days labels want music that's mastered already. So I mean, if you can do a mix down, at least, you know, make it sound good, you know, compare it with whatever's out there, make it sound close enough at least, you know. So just invest in yourselves, man, you know.
Is there anything else apart from a third album, a current album, an EP, a move to Berlin, that you would want to tell the Beatport listeners about?
Oh, I don't know, man. I'd probably say something iconic like, watch out, I'm coming.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think we've covered everything, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. We have as well. The track that you have all been listening to underneath our chat has been The Firefly's Journey, which comes from the ambient album that Jazzuelle was talking about. It's yet unreleased. The last track for this episode is Above Smoke, which comes from his forthcoming EP out on Mo Black Records. I've been your host Tigerlight, and this has been the Beatport podcast featuring Jazzuelle.